Good afternoon and evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Ambassadorial Wing, and another installment of Council of the Ones Babylon 5 review. And hope y'all have had a very pleasant week. Hope y'all are ready for a very exciting and hopefully restful weekend. And today, I've got my good friend, my fellow council member. You know him, you love him, we all love him, the one and only Zodrider. And to everybody out there in the chat, my good friend and fellow geek, MB Geek of MB Geek, Let's Talk. We are all, gosh, Geek, it is good to see you, bud. Appreciate you tuning in this afternoon. And as always, make sure you smash that like button. Share this out with all of your Babylon 5 friends. And if this is your first visit to the Ambassadorial Wing and the Council, welcome. Appreciate you tuning in today. So, Zod, how you doing, man?
We have always been here.
Yes, we have. We have.
It is great to be here. This episode, I'm excited to talk about. This is fantastic. I love this episode. This is one of my favorite episodes of Babylon 5. Period. It's a very poignant episode.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, I mean, this honestly for me is also one of my favorite episodes, and it is it's a real thinker because it gives you the opportunity to ask the question: who would I want to meet, and who, if from that has passed on, and what would I say to them? But as always, we do not do this show alone. This council is large, and it is got a lot of great minds to it, and of course, give a very warm welcome. I'm not sure which link to use, but give a warm ambassadorial welcome to Lord Koj. Koj, are you there?
Hey.
Okay.
Where you at? Oh,
Koj, are you there? Okay, let's try removing him and putting him back in. Okay, Koj, can you hear me? Blink once for yes, two for no.
Perhaps he's muted.
He might be. We don't know. Koj, if you're muted, please let us know, or please unmute yourself. So, but also, okay, it's Koj Palooza in the backstage. All right.
I think I made it this time.
There he
you
is.
go.
There he is. In all his, there he is, all in all his audio glory. Yes.
Thank you.
Koj, good to hear from you, man.
Good to be here.
Pleasure. You too. So,
likewise, my brothers.
Good to see you, man. Truly. So, but yeah, as I was saying, this is a very intriguing episode, and I actually gave the council some homework this past week. I asked them if you had the opportunity to do so, if you could meet one person from your past and one person from history, and have the opportunity to have a conversation with them, who would it be? In both terms. And before we get into that, our fellow council member, our good friend Fiona Wolf, has put together a short little video to give her thoughts on this episode. So we're going to let council member Fiona have the floor for a few minutes to give her thoughts on this episode. So give me just a minute to get that pulled up here. And we'll give that a listen. So, all right. 1 second, my gents. Sure everything is copacetic here. It is. All right. Councilmember Fiona Wolf, the floor is yours.
Okay, let's see. For the Day of the Dead episode here, it has a lot of connotations that are rather interesting, and you get a bit of foreshadowing, especially with Mr. Lanier. Oh my. But honestly, I think this episode really helped out in terms of who Lockley is. because they were able to bounce off a character from their past, right? And even though you didn't get to see everybody, Sheridan didn't get to have a heart to heart with Kosh because he wasn't caught on the precarious side of the how shall we say dead wall. He still was able to get a message from Kosh. I think, what was it, via Lockley, if I remember correctly. And honestly, yeah, it makes you wonder if more people would have shown up. Like, I thought it was pretty heartfelt that for Garibaldi it was Dodger, because she was a sprightly lady full of vim and vigor, and he really did love her because he was still on the outs with Lise and everything. And even here now with this part of season 5, he's not quite back together with Lise. He's mending that relationship, but he's not quite there yet. But it's mainly usually most of the dead visitors are there to compare and contrast and like to either warn the person in question, whether they listen to that advice or not, like, a certain Mr. Morden to Mr. Lanier, remains to be seen. But yeah, in the overall grand scheme of things, it would have been nice to be able to talk to somebody from your past. In my case, since the ambassador asked us, like, what kind of person would you want to talk to? I think I'd want to be able to at least talk to my aunt for a day and just tell her, like, hey, guess what? I finally got around to writing some of those books you wanted to read. I really should have started sooner so you could have read some of them. But, sometimes you just never know when people will be taken away from you. And I probably would have told my aunt all about what's happening. She would have loved to see all her grandkids. I know that for a fact. But I guess the biggest part is, there's like a lot of stuff that if you got the chance to, say, speak to another family member or somebody that you cared about, even if it was for another day, I could definitely see why some of the people within Babylon 5 would be like, okay, I definitely want to be part of this Day of the Dead thing. And it's kind of interesting that Malaria said he's not interested in participating because there would have been a lot of people he would have had a bone to pick with. But knowing Malari, he might have ended up get to see somebody that he would have enjoyed seeing too. You just never know. Because it seems like most of the people in the episode today got to see somebody that was vital to them. And they had a general decent reaction. But unlike Mr. Lanier, man, Lanier, even though you hate Mr. Morden, he would have laid up a lot more truth bombs for you, but your heart just wasn't ready to hear it. And by the time you did hear your heart, it was already too late. But you can also kind of see Lanier's tension in this episode, especially because, he did want to go to the station to surprise Delenn. But then he's also simultaneously reminded of the fact that, Sheridan is in the spot he wanted. Sheridan is Delenn's husband. So there's certain kinds of boundaries that he can't really tread upon anymore because he's not in the running if he ever was. To me personally, I don't think Lanier was ever seen as anything more than more of like a familiar or family relationship with for Delenn, like a favored son or nephew, or even she could have seen him as kind of like a younger brother. But I don't think that spark of like romance was ever on her end. But I do think she was aware of it, especially after she got married to Sheridan, which is the reason why you even see between now and even the last episode there, Sleeping in the Light, where she's finally able to say his name after so many years. Because she probably feels like she has a lot of unfinished business, even with Lanier. Of course, this whole episode does interesting contrast. I did find it pretty heartfelt that Lockley got to talk with her friend again, and you see just how rough Lockley's upbringing was, and joining Earth Force pretty much got her out of a bad situation. Oh, and believe my last, Malari actually did get stuck in, because I'm re-looking at it here for a moment. Yes, he did get stuck in the dead zone, and he got to see Adira Tiri. Yeah, he thought he was going to talk to the first emperors or somebody along those lines. And it's like, no, it's somebody he actually needed. So believe my last. It's because sometimes I end up rewatching bits and clips of each episode just to remind myself of some of the little bits that went on. And actually, this part with Adira does tie back into the Centauri trilogy. He, like the way Malaria is sent off, he gets to reunite with his various wives, because again, the Centauri usually have the whole symbolic thing of 3. Oh man, yeah. But it is pretty heartfelt. It seems like the people that have kind of like the darkest points in their lives as of right now, it's kind of a juxtaposition. Lanier gets Morden, which he definitely didn't want. But if you look at it, even exploring some of Lanier's past, there wasn't too many characters that really affected Lanier into that level to where, that person has passed and then they could basically bring him more influence. The only other person I think might have fit if they had brought him back for it, if he could have come back for it, is maybe have Lanier talking to Sinclair. Yeah, but based on how things were going for the actual actor, it's too bad they couldn't have brought him back. Oh well, there's probably a whole lot of characters that could have come back for this episode just to say hi, but I don't think Warren Keffer would have. I don't think anybody really formed an attachment to him. I'm sorry. And unlike me updating my aunt about whatever's happening in our current lives, there's only so many minutes in the day that they could put on screen for the show here. So they had to get short, sweet, and to the point and do a bit of compare and contrast. They gave Wando a bit of a oasis to sink into, and in some ways Garibaldi as well. But it also, in the meantime, helped them realize something about themselves. Like Garibaldi's finally realizing he's letting some things go way too far, and he knows he's going back into the bottle when he shouldn't. And then, of course, there's the Kosh message from Lockley to Sheridan, and you could just see it on Sheridan's face. He's like, "Oh man!" Simultaneously, what did I miss versus what? Ooh, you just never will know. And it makes the Berkiri's rights and more religious connotations in this episode even more paramount. It's like if it only happens ever so often, is it any small wonder that a decent portion of the station embraced it versus they got the heck out of Dodge? Because I was looking at earlier part in the episode, there's some people who actively evacuated so that they wouldn't get stuck on the Berkiri side of things. But as for the second part of what Ambassador wanted me to cover, any kind of famous person I'd want to talk to, probably C.S. Lewis or Tolkien, because their works have really influenced me with my own writing, not so much in how I write, but in the various topics that I cover in my own series. So how you guys doing? Have a good day.
As always, Fiona Wolf, thank you for your thoughts this afternoon. We greatly appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you next week. So you have a good weekend, and hopefully don't work too hard. So, well, fellas, a lot to unpack there, and not to mention our own thoughts on the episode itself. So I'm going to open up the floor. Zod, Koj, your thoughts on this episode and on the homework.
I'll, if I can, I'll save my homework answer for last. But
sure. Yeah.
All right, cool. But she brought up an interesting point that I never thought about before, and I had a new thought about how Morden was one to go to Lanier and not Sinclair. And I was thinking, how interesting and cool would it be? Because in Sinclair's own timeline, he dies as a Minbari. So he would have died Minbari, meaning if he came back, he would have came back as Valen. And I'm wondering how cool and full circle it could have been for Valen / Sinclair to come to Lanier, and Sinclair knowing that Lanier knows him as Sinclair and as Valen, so he could kind of have because I noticed everyone who came back got to kind complete some unfinished business or mend some things that they didn't get to with who they came back with. And it would be kind of interesting, and I think more uplifting for Lanier than having an enemy have like someone like so profound as someone his friend and someone he followed the teachings of in his like faith to like, you know, come full circle with that. I think that would have been neat, but totally understandable.
Indeed. Songwriter, your thoughts?
Yeah, the main thing I was thinking about, and I was also wondering about, is there were not that I don't really recall all that many interactions between Lanier and Mr. Morden throughout the series. So I found it actually pretty compelling that Lanier would have that conversation with Morden of all people. But I also felt like it was a very poignant and important discussion for them to have. I felt like everybody who had any experiences with someone from the great beyond was having a conversation with somebody that they needed to have a conversation with. It didn't just feel, because like what Fiona was saying about how there were a lot of characters that probably could have been brought back. Yeah, if they would have had like 16 hours for the episode, they could have brought back a ton of characters. But the reality is it's like it's got to be an important piece to them. And I love the fact that we were teased with the concept of Sheridan maybe meeting with Kosh, and we didn't get it. This was one of those times. This is one of those times that I was actually really glad that it didn't happen. For some reason, I loved the idea of it being a possibility, but not occurring. Because I know that if we would have gotten it and we would have gotten it on screen, it would have been some of the best Babylon 5 writing we'd seen in a long time. So in a lot of ways, I was kind of like, well, I'm glad it didn't happen, because the buildup was almost as important as the conversation itself would have been. So I don't know if anybody else felt that way, but it just was something that I was, for the first time in like science fiction viewing in my whole life, I was actually happy that we didn't get that. I don't know. It was weird.
That makes sense, man.
Well, for me, when Lockley's friend Zoe says, I have a message for somebody named Sheridan from somebody, and I was like, I know who I was like, and I don't think she actually said who it was from per se, or at least they didn't say it on screen. But when Lockley said it to Sheridan there in the hallway, she's like, I've also got a message from somebody named Kosh, and he's like, and his face almost goes white.
Ooh.
I mean, it goes.
And how did she not? And how did she not know who Kosh was? Wouldn't she know, having gotten on board and knowing about the Vorlons? Would she not be aware of who Kosh was? That was the thing that struck me a bit funny.
I think with like files, she would know about him.
Right. Being that she is now commander of Babylon 5.
But there's also a lot of stuff that's not written in the books or reports. It's not a complete report, which means it's a poor run station. Just kidding. But sure.
Well, but here's the thing.
Well, maybe Ivanova encrypted everything before she left.
Here's the thing too. There might have been files that were even classified for not even for Lockley to see. Now she might have. Now that's just a theory of my own. But the interesting thing is, and he's like, "Well, what's the message?" He's like, when the long dark night comes, go where the end begins.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, when it's your time to go back to where our ending happened, the end of the age of the first ones, and that was, of course, Coriana 6. So, and Archer Column does bring up a a good point here. She'd only been come on several months after Kosh was killed, and that's true too. So she may not have even gotten to those files because she's been dealing with so many other things that it may not necessarily been pertinent to what she's been dealing with in order to operate the station. So it might be that the files are there. They may not even necessarily be encrypted. It's just like if you think about all the logs, all the personal logs and everything else there in those files, especially for Sheridan, he's got a ton of them, I imagine. It may be further down on the log list. So,
Yeah,
but when it comes to who each person got to meet, I was a little surprised that it was Dodger for Garibaldi, but at the same time, here's the thing. This was my first time watching this episode. This, again, was another first time watch for me. I had seen pieces of this episode, but I never got to see it all the way through. And I have to admit, I really enjoyed it. Because, as I said, it gave me the opportunity to ask the question, and of course, ask you all the same question. If you had the opportunity, and it was one night, who would you want to have a conversation with? And I did add in both from your own personal life and somebody famous. So, to give my answer on that just briefly, if it was somebody from my past who is no longer with us, it would be my dad. It would be my dad, because there are so many things I would want to ask him that I never got a chance to, and just to tell him I love him one more time. And maybe just to hear his voice. Because now I can still hear it in my head, but it's kind of a distant memory. But as far as somebody famous, and it isn't necessarily who you're going to think my answer would be. It would be a minor known officer from the American Civil War. And he was the commanding officer at the Battle of Little Big Top. Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Chamberlain. Because he potentially turned the entire tide of the Battle of Gettysburg. And I would want the opportunity to just meet him, talk about his life, talk about how he felt about the Civil War, and just shake his hand. I know that may be a very oddball answer, but it's my answer. So, anyways, guys, the floor is yours. So, wherever you want to go with this.
Okay, well, someone of my past would definitely be my best friend, brother from another mother, and me and my friend, my other brother, we consider each other brothers, and we're close to each other. And
I have a friend just like that. So
yeah,
I know exactly what you mean.
Hell yeah! So it has to be him, because he was killed in the city I actually moved back to, and his passing was very brief, out of nowhere, of course, and I would like to see him again. I know that, and it's crazy because a few days ago, his mother liked a post on Facebook, and I saw the alert, so I clicked the post, and it was actually one of the last things he posted, something inspirational and all that. He's a good Christian, great uplifting guy, and you just want to lift people up and all that. You could tell if you were blessed to meet him, you would know. And he was just a lot of light. And he made a post to me and one of his homegirls about getting us out of a rut. or just something inspirational. And I said a little thank you, and I told him I loved him, and I'll see you soon. And he liked it. And then I totally forgot about that post. So seeing that again kind of got that feeling right after you, like a few days after you gave this assignment. So it would definitely be him. For history, honestly, I was thinking about one of the founders of Kung Fu back in the day, 525 years before Christ. But
Wow.
a little bit sooner is that I would actually either Richard or Mildred Loving, the couple that
Oh
fell
yes.
fell in
Yeah.
love and the mixed
Yeah.
mixed ethnicity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then they were tried
I
for
know who
that
you're
and all
talking
that.
about. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
remember. They actually did a movie on that not
Yeah, they
too long
did.
ago. I actually considered watching it. I never got around to it, but yeah,
Check it out. It's kind of nice. I liked it. But their story before that always moved me because I am quote quote mixed ethnicity,
Yeah.
and just growing up under two cultures, and the cultures I live in here
Mhm.
in California, I had an opportunity to see like the love of both cultures and also the prejudices of both cultures, but also realizing that in the past that this was, not deemed like acceptable or allowed. And
Yeah.
if they didn't go through such ordeal, then me, my sisters, and generations before me, right before me, and soon after me, probably would have a longer time to be, or I would not have been. So I
That's
just
true.
think it would be beautiful to talk to them, and
Yeah.
either one of them. I think
Mhm.
that would be historically more meaningful to me, other than
That's
anything like art or martial arts or whatever I do. But I think my whole being is like, hey, what you guys did, changed the world for the better, and I believe I'm here because of them and their ordeal. So
amazing, Koj.
I
Wow.
think
Yeah, Koj.
that'd be great. I was crying when I was watching that movie because I've been fans of them the whole time because I struggled with identity, and I found faith, I found friends, I found family, and life is just beautiful. And I thank them a lot always.
Koj. Very well said. So, Zod Rider, your thoughts on the episode, or your thoughts on the homework? So,
Oh, okay. Well, I'll go with the homework.
okay.
If I were to be able to talk to a loved one that's passed away, I would most certainly choose my little brother, um, who passed away in 2001, and
Mhm.
it would just be nice to have a conversation and to just to be able to talk to him one more time. So that's who I would talk to if it was a loved one. And there are many, but you said only
Yeah.
one, so like in the episode, that's who I would
Mhm.
choose to speak
Good
with.
choice.
And a famous person that I would want to have a conversation with is a movie director who passed away in 2015, horror director Wes Craven. I'd like to sit down and have a
Oh,
Dude,
conversation with Wes Craven. I
dude,
I
that
am I don't I mean I think it would be fantastic. I have so many questions I would want to I want to ask.
dude.
I want to ask this man. It was always an ambition of mine to interview him at some point. And yeah, I don't I don't know how to really elaborate on it, but he's someone that I really would like, somebody I really admire, and I would have loved to have had a chance to talk to him.
Zod, that is a. I'm not saying this to just puff you up, but that is a marvelous answer. That's honestly,
that
yeah,
is good, man. Because I could see
that's a
you two having a good Zod Rider show. You know,
Yeah, oh, well,
that's
yeah.
like,
I'm like,
oh,
that's what I'm
that's your
thinking. I'm like,
heart.
I would love to just
pick
chop it
his
up with
brain.
him for an hour, pick his brain for an hour. That's all I would want to do, just for an hour. We could just sit in a room and he could talk about all of the, because there's so many things that I learned about him growing up, because he was one of my favorite directors, because I've always been a big horror fan, and growing up he basically you know revitalized the genre with all the movies and stuff that he'd come up with. And there were so many things he talked about where he talked about, I'm a big fan of talking about, your dreams and what goes on when you're sleeping and stuff like that, and the thoughts and things that are swirling around in your head. So for me, I remember hearing about how he was always tortured by nightmares and he always had things swirling around in his head, and I would just love to pick his brain about that kind of stuff too. So it's kind of like kind of like a meta thing for me more than anything else. But I don't know.
That's important. That's good, man. That's a good one.
That's a very good one. So, well, and to kind of bring this back around to the episode itself, I'm honestly glad that that Londo got to have one night of respite, one night of relief in terms of having his time with Adira. And there was no big, deep, heavy conversation. They spent the night together. And I think, considering what Londo's about to enter into, that will be something that he will carry with him throughout his reign as emperor. Although he'll be a cursed reign, unfortunately, because of the Drakh, and everything. But I honestly, I liken that particular. I liken that part of the episode to a personal experience that happened to me many years ago. Not in the context of it being anything sexual or anything, but it being someone that was very close to me, someone very dear to me. It involved a family member, and it was very surreal. Let me put it that way. And it was like one of those. It was almost like this episode where we sat and we talked for what seemed like forever. And it was my late grandmother, my mom's mother, who helped raise me. But the other interesting thing about the thing about this episode that is honestly kind of comical is the fact that Lockley doesn't take what the Brakiri are saying to her, or the offer that they're giving her, at face value. She sees it more as metaphorical rather than literal. And this episode also brings into this is the first episode really that deals with the metaphysical element of death in a very real, substantive way. I mean, this episode is almost like Babylon 5 meets the Twilight Zone or the Outer Limits.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. It like totally fits in with that whole aesthetic, because you always have to remember the Twilight Zone and Outer Limits were at their core sci-fi anthologies.
Yes.
And so essentially this was every interaction that you had with people who, as they were interacting with people from the dead, could be considered a little mini anthology scene.
Yes.
Being only poignant to each individual that it was happening to. Yeah. Amazing.
Well, it's interesting because Jakar is like, I don't want to be anywhere near the Brakiri sector. He's like, I'm going to sleep on the command deck or CNC.
Yeah.
But then the next day he's talking, I think, to he's either talking to Zach Allen or he's talking to Corwin. I can't remember which. But he's like, I wish now I had stayed in my quarters. He's like, because I would have liked to have had that interaction. And you have to wonder, who would have Jakar met if he had stayed in his quarters? Would it have been a friend or would it have been a foe? And, this is the what if part of this episode. I think with Londa or with Shakar, it might have been one of two people. It might have been Natoth, or it might have even been Emperor Cartagia. Now that
Actually,
would be. Go ahead,
sorry,
KJ.
go on.
No, go ahead.
Actually, I honestly, with seeing how all these people were coming for to fill in the gaps of something they didn't get to revisit and bring messages of healing and all that, I really think it would be Justen. I think that's the name of his uncle, who went into battle and got killed by the shadows, because that was another person taken away from him. And he was praying so hard for his uncle. I think having some last conversations with his uncle that was stolen from him, just like Dodger was taken away, just like Zoe was taken away. Like a lot of these people have something in common, that in Adira, she was taken away and they didn't get any last true goodbye or final words. I think it would be Justen. I think that's his name. I gotta look back.
Yeah, it was Justen because, and I think the cool thing is the actor who played Justen was still alive at the time. I think he even might still.
He was the first soul hunter.
Yeah, C. Morgan Shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, C. Morgan Shepherd, one of my really all-time favorite character actors. He did a lot of
such a great voice.
Yes, he has a very powerful. His voice is made for like narration and audiobooks and stuff like that.
Yes,
he actually
very prominent.
Just real quick, because I'll let you go. He actually did the voiceover to kind of piggyback on a comment I made earlier. He did the voiceover narration at the beginning of the TV movie for Gettysburg, and he actually had an on-screen role as a Confederate officer.
Oh wow!
And the other cool thing was he actually played the warden of Rua Penthe in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country.
Ooh, I gotta check that out. It's been a while with Star Trek with me, but that's sick. He's been around.
He was even in an episode of Next Generation. I think it was like season 1 or season 2, somewhere along in there. It was a schizoid man where the scientists transferred his consciousness into Data's body.
Oh, okay, I remember that. Oh snap!
Yep. Oh yeah, remember?
Oh snap!
Yep, that was C. Morgan Shepherd, or I think he just goes by Morgan Shepherd, maybe. So
nice.
But Zodwriter, you were going to say, go ahead, please.
Oh no, I was just going to say that I think for me, one of the most emotional sequences in the entire episode was between Lockley and Zoe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that entire sequence with Lockley and Zoe was, and Fiona said it, and I think
we learned so much about Lockley in that sequence. We learned more about Lockley during that sequence than we have in the entire series since she's joined.
This is why I think this is why I feel like this episode and the episode with the janitors should switch places. I feel.
How so?
As far as, because I feel this will introduce us to Lockley in a way where we could gravitate to her a little bit more.
I got you. Okay.
And still enjoy the journey. I don't know. That's just me from a creative, I don't know, just feeling. But the way it planned out is just the way it is, and it's still beautiful. I just love that Lockley. This is the one that truly wins me over with Lockley.
And it
felt like
Lockley
she was either background
character.
or we're not sure. Yeah.
Right. Turns her into a full-fledged character where you actually get the idea that she's a real person and she's and I mean, it just felt to me like, and I'm not gonna hold back on this. It felt like to me when they kind of threw in the whole thing about the relationship between her and Sheridan, that it was kind of cheap. It was like a cheap way tacked on to give her to give her some kind of depth because they weren't prepared to go into it yet. And then this episode comes out and you finally get the depth of the character. And now you can finally appreciate Lockley for who she is. And that's what we needed. That's what we needed to be sold, like you said, on Lockley. Because otherwise, you know, she just continues to pale in comparison to the overdeveloped Susan Ivanova, who she replaced.
Yeah. Because Ivanova didn't open up until later, honestly, but we still got enough time to see her as she does her job to believe that she cares about where she is.
We've got 4 seasons of Ivanova, and Ivanova even appears in the series finale. So that's in and of itself. It's like Lockley needed something to give her some depth, and I'm just amazed they were able to do it in
just one episode.
In such a and not even like giving her own full episode. Like just
this is true.
Like she just got a scene just like everybody else. She got a few scenes, but she got scenes just like, Garibaldi did with Dodger and Lanier with Morden. She got her scenes, but it was just like they were very important, and they were, in my opinion, that was the heart of the episode.
I agree, brother.
I have to.
Hell yeah.
I have to sincerely agree. And our Colin brings up a good point. Do people think leaving out her relationship with Sheridan would have made any real difference to the story?
No,
I think.
Nope.
I think maybe it did add a little bit. I think it added some texture or some context to her character, and not so much in the relationship itself, but in establishing the previous connection that she had with him and the fact that they both
trusted each other regardless of what the scenario is.
Yeah, they also acknowledge each other as equals. I think that's what that part of that episode really brings to bear with the relationship between Lockley and Sheridan. And so, The other aspect of this episode we really haven't touched on as of yet is Lanier and his interaction with Mr. Morden. And when he first sees Delenn, he's like, how are you and your partner doing? And she's like, she corrects him. She's like, it's husband. John is my husband, not my partner. And he's still resistant to the idea that she is with John now, not with him.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah. And, I have to say this.
In the magnitude, wow.
I have to say this. What Morden had to say to Lanier, there are times in our lives where it's the people who we detest the most who are going to tell us the hard truths that we don't necessarily want to hear, but that we need to, because our real friends, our true, deep, closely connected friends, may not necessarily have the heart to do so. But someone that we have a very sour connection to or have a very low approval of, they're the ones that will come in and tell us the inconvenient truth. Inconvenient but necessary. And unfortunately, Morden is right, because Lanier does end up betraying the Rangers and ultimately betraying himself.
That is right, because these people are here because of something that they need to hear, and Lanier is so isolated. The closest person to what he needs to hear is like someone such as Morden. And you're true. You're right about that, because a lot of loved ones, we don't want to say a lot of, okay, here's a light reason. Here's a light example. Like your significant other is like, hey, does this make me look fat? And then you're like, do I say the truth or what's going on? The reason why I think a lot of us loved ones, we hold back from our other other level. What am I talking about? Okay, when we don't tell the truth, it's usually because we don't want the heartful, hard truth hurting someone we love to the point where we lose them, like they leave or whatever. And I I've been in several situations in the past where I just had to tell the truth because it's just too damaging for them to not even know it, and that's cost me a lot of friendships and stuff. And but on the flip side, it's strengthened other friendships too, because the truth sometimes when it's denied, it hurts. I think that's why the truth hurts is when it's denied. And Lanier right here, he's denying the truth that Delenn belongs with another man, and he's denying that so hard to himself that it's blinding him and sending him on a path that he's unaware of. That Morden is able to give him a little clue of like, hey, be careful, but he does it in the Morden way, of course.
Yes. As your thoughts?
I gotta say that, you know, Lanier betraying the Alan Shock for because he loves Delenn, I'm gonna be honest, kind of pisses me off. He's Minbari. He should be above that. His relationship with Delenn needs to be at another level. It's kind of like the relationship. You know what I hearken it to? And I'm going to give you guys an example. You can agree with me or disagree with me, but this is kind of how I look at it. From Star Trek The Next Generation, Guinan and Picard. Their relationship, where Guinan says their relationship is beyond friendship, it's beyond romance,
family.
It's beyond family. It's that's the kind of loyalty, that's the kind of relationship that Lanier has to have for Delenn. It has to transcend simple romantic connotations, and so I was disappointed in Lanier, but I knew he was going to do it, and I knew he was going to mess up. I knew he was going to betray because again, he's in that situation. He's stuck in that trope, and I agree with you 1,000% that it needed to be said, and I can't think of a better character to deliver it than Mr. Morden.
Honestly. That's so true.
I mean, it just was epic. I mean, and let's be honest. Just seeing this Rod Serling like just genius sitting there with the newspaper, just being super cool about everything, like he's the perfect villain. And I honestly was sad when he was gone, because he's just like the perfect foil for everybody. Even seeing this interaction with Lanier. He didn't come to give Lanier good news. I mean, nope. the whole, the idea of, him having the newspaper, giving the good news to it's just, oh my God, there's just so many little things about that exchange that just added to an already perfect episode, in my opinion.
Already the setting too, because Lanier, he was meditating, meaning his eyes are closed, so he's actually visually seeing shadows in darkness, and he just hears the voice of Morden, turns around, and he's gone. So Morden, in a way, is still speaking to him as a shadow, but Lanier is allowing it.
Lanier doesn't have the luxury to not accept it emotionally. His emotion,
right.
When you become that high up with Minbari, when you are on that level, you're beyond all of that. You can get, I mean, no offense, but Lanier is at a position where he can get himself all kinds of, Minbari females to mess around with. He's far beyond that. He doesn't need to be emotionally invested in Delenn to that point where it's going to corrupt his very belief system and everything he's believed in. It's just, to me, I'm just like, I always get a little bit frustrated when I see these kinds of things happen in shows and stuff like this, where it all crumbles because of the romantic interest in one person. It's like, in all honesty, that has got to be the most ridiculous trope that I've ever seen, because at the end of the day, when you think about it, even if you take his intellect out of it completely and just focus on pure emotion, his emotions should be beyond that simple romantic thing by now, at this point. I mean, because he already knows that Delenn is in love with Sheridan, that that there is a bond there is a romance, there's husband and wife. He knows all about that at this point. So at that point, it should have been shut off, and now he's focused. That should have actually made him a better, and actually, when you think about it, made him a more loyal, even more fiercely loyal to Delenn, because Delenn is following her beliefs and following her ambitions and leading with what she believes is the right thing. So that should be enough for Lanier too, to follow her even further. But I don't know. I just was disappointed in Lanier as a character.
I feel you. And I think that's the difference between him and Zach Allen, because they both have this love interest that they kind of don't confess at the right time or at all. And how it eats them up, I think Zach Allen handles it better. And Lanier just has that, he fell into that trap of obsession. Like we say, that he's sprung without being sprang. And he's stuck on that tunnel vision. Because, dude, he's like a Minbari hero. He's been in so many crucial battles and situations. You're right. He could go out and have a game and move on, but he chooses not to.
Well, and shout to the chat, Jeff B. Jeff, it's good to see you. He does have a good comment here. Appreciate the harsh showing against sensibility from Lanier, though. Yeah, Jeff, that is true. Well, and if you look at another character that I think we all here that have an appreciation for, and that's of course Anakin Skywalker. Because if you look at him from the prequel arc, and you look at him as like the tragic hero, which was what he was intended to be, part of his fall, part of the tragedy of his character is because of his attachment, and not just solely to Padme, but also to his mother, to Obi-Wan, and to certain other Jedi within the Order, and even to Palpatine, even though that relationship in and of itself is very toxic and is very manipulative. But it was because of Anakin's fear and also of losing people around him, but also because of his connections to people that did cause his downfall. You could make a parallel between Lanier and Anakin. Now, granted, the dynamics are different, most definitely. But what you have with Lanier is, I think they did establish this well enough. In season 3 and even season 4, with various comments and conversations and so on with Lanier and others, that they were setting up a tragic fall for Lanier. And here we actually are starting to see it take place. And we see it being vocalized both by Lanier and then reinforced by Morden. And if you look at what happened to Anakin, and that's a whole other video in and of itself. And there's a friend of mine and everything who has done a very well put together video on the character of Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader. And Anakin is a archetype of the tragic fallen hero. And you don't want to see him fall, but you know that the fall is coming. And all you can do is sit back and watch it happen. The same is true here with Lanier. We like Lanier. We respect Lanier. We've become emotionally attached to Lanier through the first 4 seasons of this series. He has been through so much. He has accomplished so much. And yet the one thing he cannot overcome is his own emotional and even you could say romantic attachment to Delenn. Someone that even he knows he cannot have. But his emotions and his sensibilities will not relent. It's irrational. We all know it is. But deep down, I think to a degree, we all can understand where Lanier is coming from. It's kind of it echoes very strongly of the potential relationship between Ivanova and Marcus Cole. And Ivanova's words are very strongly echoed or are even more impactful. Here, all love is unrequited.
I would argue that Lanier had opportunities throughout the series where if he really wanted to explore potential in a romantic relationship with Delenn, that he could have. I would argue that. I think that it's one of those situations where, yeah, you've had these feelings, you've had these emotions. This is something that you've wanted or whatever, and if you didn't do anything about it when you had the opportunities, you had chances, now you can't come back later after she gets married and be like, well, now I can't accept this. I can't accept that she's with somebody else and not with me. So in a lot of ways, I would say that a lot of it has to do with a lot of this situation that Lanier finds himself in with his romantic attachment with Delenn is kind of his own fault at this point. And that's another reason why I was so disappointed with Lanier's actions later on in the series, because I feel like he is reacting emotionally to something that he did have control over at one point in time, or at least had potential to try and develop. So that's kind of where I sit, because there were times when even she was I don't know, there were a few times where she was where Delenn was kind of on dates or with different people on the station. She kind of had her little things going on. I mean, at one point there was a scene where she was in Garibaldi's room eating popcorn with Garibaldi, watching Looney Tunes cartoons. I don't know if you
yes,
that.
I remember. I mean,
yeah, she's down to hang out, but
I'm just saying, I'm not saying that there would have been a romantic thing between Delenn and Garibaldi, but I'm saying that the idea that Lanier didn't have a chance at all the entire 4 seasons of the show, and now he's gonna be pissed because she's married to Sheridan and he has no way of reconciling his romantic feelings. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also think he has a complex because he was like kind of role playing, because Delenn was either his mentor / boss / teacher.
Sure.
So I don't know if that's a thing about him, but you're totally right.
But we also know that those kind of relationships exist and happen too, where the student falls in love with the teacher falls in love with the student, and in some cases they are able to have go on to have a successful romantic relationship. So it's not impossible.
Yeah, well, Bruce Lee's wife was his martial arts student before they dated.
Yep.
So yeah, totally.
Yeah. So it's very, very, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. So these are the kinds of things I was looking at. And, again, your parallels were, Ambassador, where you mentioned Anakin Skywalker, but I would argue with Anakin that's where Anakin went right, where Lanier went wrong. Anakin was in love with Padme since he was a 10-year-old kid, and he grew up just to love her even more. And what did he do? He acted on his feelings in spite of knowing what the repercussions would be because of all of the because of the views of the Jedi about attachments and that type of malarkey. So
yeah, and Anakin was like making it known he likes her.
right, and he was telling Obi-Wan. It wasn't like he was hiding it. That's one of the things about their relationship too, where Anakin couldn't hide it from Obi-Wan that yes, I'm in love with Padme. I've been in love with Padme my whole life. And here, I would wonder if like Lanier ever had a conversation with Veer off screen, because they became really good friends, and I would wonder if he ever confessed his feelings for Delenn to Lanier off screen. I mean to Veer off screen, if they ever had that conversation. I sometimes wonder.
Well, for all we know, they very well could. And want to send a shout to the chat, our fellow council member, our friend, Mountains of Elysium. Good to see you. So hope you're having a good evening. And thank you for stopping by. And zooty zoot to you too, bud. So
Hey.
so not able to stay long. Well, you have a good time with the family, and we will of course see you next weekend or next Friday. So glad you could pop by, bud, and give our best to the family. So, well, guys, I think we've pretty much dug as far into this episode as we possibly can. So, I'm gonna let you fellas have any final thoughts that you have on this episode, and then we will probably wrap up. So, gentlemen, the floor is yours.
I could think of only one thing, that there's like one cool little theme here that other people's different cultures isn't that scary and threatening. Because I remember in what is it, Parliament of Dreams season 1, when they showed like they all shared their belief system. I feel this is like the episode of the Brakiri belief system. But they were able to visit, see, and share. And I think there's this, Jakar displayed this fear of just another. Essentially, I took it as a fear of a different culture and whatever. And in my experience, when I've been like, obviously I don't go where I'm not invited. I don't want to be rude or anything, but I have been invited to like a mosque before, and I'm like, well, you guys know I don't have the same faith as you, and like, yeah, we're not doing anything ritual. We just like to, because I picked up my auntie from a mosque a bunch of times when she was staying with us, and I was like, sure, well, if you know I'm not of this, and they're like, yeah, just essentially people don't want you to be disrespectful, just be respectful. And if there's a certain like take off shoes or wear some on your head, that's no big deal to me. And it's just people sharing their beauty and showing you, so you understand where they're coming from in a way of embracing, not as recruiting. I think a lot of people are worried about that. And obviously there's some places that, okay, only so-and-so can come in if you are a part this, or you can't have this bread and wine unless you are. And, of course, don't do those. Don't do anything that compromises yourself. But there are areas and places that you are able to invite and experience and watch and observe and see what other cultures are, just for the mere appreciation, to understand and not be afraid. And there's something beautiful you could take from it that enriches your own faith and culture. And I think that there's a subtle theme of that in this episode that I really, really like a lot.
Yes.
Because Jakar is a good example of that too, because he had this revelation. It's like, I may have taken something from it, but he's clearly part of the book of Jaquan, and he has his own path, and that never changes. But he could have had something from it, like everyone else did.
Yeah, you never know. Who do you think Jakar would have ended up talking to?
Yeah,
maybe Natoth.
Oh, but she's still spoiler. She's still around.
Yeah, she's still alive.
Yeah.
We'll remember we mentioned, I think we mentioned it might have been his uncle just Sten and everything. So,
Sten.
yeah, so.
Uh-huh.
But, well, guys, great stream. Great conversation. And our thanks again to Fiona Wolf for giving us a nice little video and everything to give her thoughts on the episode.
Do you have notes from Mountains?
I
forget.
I do, and I can read a few of them off here real quick and everything. Just give me a second to get into. Yeah, I can hear you, Koj. Okay. Let's see. Oh, that's Fiona. Okay.
I don't know if you guys can hear me right now. Everything went silent.
We can hear you. Koj, we can hear you. If you can hear us.
Koj?
Anyway, here are Elysium's notes on the episode. And I'll give them very quick. Oh, he dropped down. So, this is from our fellow council member, Mountains of Elysium. If I were to choose, it would who he would. Oh, here's Koj. Okay.
Oh,
hey, bud.
I don't know what's going on.
Us?
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Welcome back.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Oh, good. Yeah, I can hear you. Good, thanks. It was weird there for a second.
Okay. All right. Here are Elysium's notes on. I'll just share some of them here. If I were to choose, it would probably be my mother. We had a lot left unsaid and was still painful 12 years on. If though I had to choose a famous person, it would probably be G.K. Chesterton. And I actually know who this person is. English author of fiction, theology, and politics. A convert to the Catholic Church who was able to find common ground with those of diverse faiths and none. And also those of radically different political views. Now, I wonder how that could be useful today. He was also an extremely witty man. I believe he is responsible for the glorious phrase. I would call him a half-wit, but I fear I give him too much credit by half. I do know that. Okay. Talking points. Are these really the souls of the dead? I say yes. Does that mean that we can acknowledge outside of time? Morden predicts the future. Side note. We see a very different Morden here, while still actually being Morden outside of the shadow influence. He looks like a decent person, but for Lanier's bigotry, he may have been able to avoid a terrible fate. Or faith. I think he meant to say fate. And here's a question from Elysium. If you met Morden on the Day of the Dead, would you hear him out and learn all you could, even if you didn't believe it, or would you stick your fingers in your ears? Well, Lanier does this figuratively, not literally. The having such tiny ears and ignore. I answer, and he answers, I would listen. If your enemy has insight into you that you may not know or refuse to believe. Very insightful, Elysium. And here's one more note. Going back to my earlier comment, Londo gets a visit from the woman he loves. Even though he wanted to meet a famous person, the first emperor, I thank God. And as a Catholic, this is how I see it. Knew Londo could not avoid the keepers. So no advice would help. God gave him one more night of pure joy because he is plunged into darkness. Well said, Elysium. And I cannot say I disagree with you. So.
No disagreement here either. On the notes.
No.
So. Well, anyways, folks, as I said, we're going to go ahead and wrap up for the evening or the afternoon. depending on where you're watching. We will, of course, be back next week with another installment of the Council of Ones. We will continue our review of Season 5 of Babylon 5. Do want to let you know, I will be going live tomorrow evening with a return to an old classic of the Ambassadorial Wing, the Retro Review. And we will be going back to one of my favorite decades, the 1980s, and doing a review and discussion on what I consider a James Cameron masterpiece, The Abyss. So,
have you seen the director's cut?
As a matter of fact, Zodwriter, I have, and I thoroughly enjoy it. Unfortunately, it is not available on streaming, and I do not have it on a physical copy. But I am going to change that as soon as I have the time.
Oh, it is wonderful, bro.
So,
yes.
Oh, I love that one. It might be on Amazon.
It's a completely different animal. It's like night and day.
Yes.
Yes.
So, I do have a couple of new faces that are going to be joining me for that stream. So be sure to tune in. I think I have that stream scheduled for 7 p.m. Central Time. So be sure to tune in for all the fun. And as always, if you enjoyed this stream, give it a like. Leave your comments down below with what me and the council had to discuss today. So, but that all being said, folks, you have a great night, a wonderful weekend. I will see you all later this weekend. And until next time, this is the Council of One saying 3, 2, 1. Zooty,
Zooty, zoot, zoot, zoot.
Horrible.